Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Ellie. Today I'm going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. I think this is supposed to be done in June, so I'm a little late and I've never done this tag before, but I have seen it so much all over YouTube, so I thought I would do it. There are 13 questions altogether and I will leave them in the description down below in case you want to do this tag too. The first question is, what is the best book you've read so far this year? And this was really hard, and a lot of the books that I'm going to talk about could have been used for any of the answers, so I've tried to talk about as many different books as possible. So I've chosen two different books for this question, one young adult and one adult, because I honestly just cannot pick a favourite. I don't tend to read much young adult anymore, but every so often I do go back to it, and I read A Thieves' Gambit by Cavan Lewis. I think this may have been back in April and I gave this 5 stars. It's the best young adult I have read for a very long time. It's a really pretty edition as well with the red sprayed edges. In the story we follow Rosalind, and I believe she goes by Ros, and she comes from a family of thieves. She is the third generation, I think, who is active, and then one day she receives a email from Thieves Gambit, who are offering her the chance to take part in their competition, with the winner winning money and also the chance to get any wish they want granted. So at the start of the book, this isn't a spoiler I don't think because it sets up the story, but her mum is kidnapped, so she initially takes on the task of competing in the Thieves Gambit so that she can pay the ransom that the kidnappers have over her mum. And I was just obsessed with this book. I think I read it within a day. I did not want to put it down. It was full of action. I loved all of the different characters. There was just so much going on. There is a sequel to this coming out later this year, I believe, and I think I saw on Goodreads it's called Heist Royale, so I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for that one. And then the best adult book, well actually no, I wouldn't say the best adult book because there are many I could have chosen, as I said, but this is the first book I read this year and it is one I still cannot stop thinking about, and that is Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. I wasn't actually ever going to pick this one up because I was intimidated by the size of it, and I'd heard that it was a really emotional book, and I don't really like to read emotional books. Like, I read for escapism, so if I'm sad in real life, I don't really want a book that's going to make me cry. And when they brought it into the works for £5, I thought I'll just give it a go. And since then, I haven't read the rest of the series, but I do own the rest of the series. I really do need to get around to reading it, but I think I might reread this before because, you know, it has been 6 months since I read this. In this we follow Johnny and Shannon has just moved to Johnny's school after being really badly bullied where she was before. Her home life is really not the best. Like, I'm gonna do a really bad job at trying to describe this book, but yeah, I know so many people love it and I definitely did. I think it's 100% worth the hype. I devoured it. The second question is, what is the best sequel that you've read so far this year? And as I was looking back through my Goodreads, surprisingly, I haven't read any sequels this year. I've read lots of first books in the series, and then I have this habit that I'll read the first book and then by the time I get around to reading the second or third book, I've completely forgotten what's happened and it doesn't make sense. And this year I told myself if I had any series, I was just going to binge them in one go so that I could read them back to back and fully remember what happened in the story. And surprise, surprise, I've not managed to do that. Then the issue I had is I was telling myself, right, I would then, if I'd only read the first book and left a gap, like with Binding 13, I would reread it before I continue the series. But then my brain is like, you can't reread a book when you have so many unread books that are on your shelves. So it's actually surprising that I've not read a sequel yet, and it is the 1st of July. So I definitely need to get on that and change that. Question number 3 is a new release you haven't yet read but want to. And again, there are so many books on my shelves that I could have chosen for this, but I'm going to go with Wild Love by Elsie Silver. I have just finished last month before, reading the Chestnut Spring series, and I loved all of the books that were in that series. Basically every book I've read so far by this author I've absolutely loved, so I think this is going to be a 5-star read. But this one follows Ford and Rosie, and I believe every book in this new series follows a single dad, so that's going to be interesting. And yeah, I just have really high hopes for this one. Question number 4 is your most anticipated read for the second half of the year, and I think it's probably got to be The Striker by Anna Huang. It's coming out on the 22nd of October, I believe, at least that's what it told me on Goodreads this morning. But like Elsie Silver, Anna Huang is another author where I've loved every single book that I have read by her, and I'm really excited to start like a new series from her. Like, I love the Twisted series, I'm on the Kings series. I don't know if that's what it's actually called, but like all the book titles start with Kings. I've read the first 3 of that, haven't yet got to book 4, but I've just loved everything that I've read that she's written, so I'm really excited to get another new book by her. Question number 5 is the biggest disappointment of the year, and I think for that one I'm gonna have to say King, A Battle in Blood by Scarlett St. Clair. This was a book that had been on my TBR for quite a while, and then we read it for my local Waterstones book club for the month of April, and I was expecting it to be a 5-star, and I think I gave it 2. There was just, I didn't connect to any of the characters. I felt not a lot of it really made much sense. It was more smut than plot, so if you like that, you will probably really enjoy that, but at that time that was just like not the kind of thing I wanted to be reading. And again, at book club, like the general opinion of it was that no one else really enjoyed it and they didn't particularly understand the story, and I was sad because I had high hopes for that. I had a lot of books by that author on my TBR, and it just fell a little flat for me. Then question number 6 is the biggest surprise, and this book is also one that was one of my local Waterstones book club picks, and I would not have picked this up if it wasn't for book club, and I ended up loving it, and that is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I have seen this quite a bit on BookTube over the last 2 months or so. I had never read anything by Brandon Sanderson. I was honestly quite intimidated by him, and this is quite a short one, so it was like a good introduction to him and his writing. And this book, I really liked it, and I felt like I couldn't put it down, and whenever I put it down I would just be sat thinking about the book, so I would immediately pick it up again. It has a really unreliable narrator. It was just very different to anything that I would normally read, and I definitely now do want to try more by Brandon Sanderson. Question number 7 is your favourite debut or new to you author, and that one was a very easy question to answer, and that is Elizabeth O'Rourke. Last month I binged the first 3 books of the summer series. I loved all of them, and I think she's going to be a new auto-buy author for me. I would obviously like to try some of the books by her that aren't within this series just to see if they are any different, but there are plenty of books that have been on my TBR that are by Elizabeth O'Rourke, and I know there's a book 4 in this series is now out, which I need to get, and I think there's a 5th book coming out if it isn't out already, so I have some catching up to do on this series. But I just absolutely loved all of the characters across this series. The setting, I could easily picture it. The characters just felt so real, I could relate to them, and I just absolutely loved all of the books, and I'm just really hoping I'm gonna love her other series as much as I love this one. Question number 8 is newest fictional crush, and this was kind of a hard one because although I've read some good books this year, when I first read this question I was automatically thinking of male main characters from books that I've read before this year, and I really had to think about like a favourite male main character out of all of the books I read this year. And then finally I settled on Dominic Davenport from King of Greed by Anna Huang. This was a book that I know, like I said, I love everything Anna Huang has written, and this one was one that I was a bit intimidated, well not intimidated, but I was unsure on, because it's like a second chance. Alessandra and Dominic are married and she wants a divorce, and he's like trying to win her back, and I wasn't quite sure how I was going to feel about that storyline, but I just loved the character of Dominic so much, like his grovelling, all the things he was doing to try and get her back, like I just loved it. And to be honest, I think quite a lot of my favourite male main characters have all been written by Anna Huang, and now talking about it I really want to reread this. Question number 9 is newest favourite character, and again this was a hard one to think about because there's no characters that were like standing out in my mind as like I absolutely love them, But again, I was just looking back through all the books I read on Goodreads, and Reckless by Elsie Silver just stood out to me. Winter and Theo, I just really loved both of them throughout this book. Like, I loved the relationship between the two of them. Again, they felt very real. I wouldn't necessarily say they're like my favourite characters of all time, but I did really like them as characters. Question number 10 is a book that made you cry, and I don't think I've ever actually cried whilst reading a book. But this year I've come very close twice. The first one was Binding 13, but I've already mentioned that book. So the second book was a very recent one, and that was The Summer You Found Me by Elizabeth O'Rourke. Some of the topics in this, and also all of the books in the series, they do follow like some quite heavy topics, so definitely check the trigger warnings before picking these up. But I could relate to certain aspects of this story with one of the characters, and it just made me feel very validated in my feelings, and I was very anxious to continue this once I first kind of got into it and found out what some of the main topics were going to be, because I didn't read the trigger warnings, and luckily I was able to get through it. But like I said, it was very validating for my feelings, and I was left feeling very hopeful after reading this. It just really stuck out for me, and I only finished it like 2 weeks ago, but I've honestly not been able to stop thinking about it. I feel like it's one of those books that's always going to feel very special to me, and yeah, I didn't actually cry, but I was very close to. Question number 11 is a book that made you happy, and for that one I chose Consider Me by Becca Mack. This is one of the best books, again, that I have read so far this year. I think I read this over 2 days. I just kind of sat and binged it, and it was just really enjoyable. It was a sports romance, so we have Carter and Olivia, and Carter is a hockey player and Olivia is, I believe she was best friends with one of Carter's best friend's girlfriends, so she was always off limits, and he kind of took that as a challenge, and I just really enjoyed the whole thing. I was smiling whilst I was reading it. Yeah, I just had a really good time with this one. Question number 12 is, what is the most beautiful book you've bought or received this year? And I think it's got to be Burning Crowns by Catherine Doyle and Catherine Webber. I have the Waterstones exclusive edition. Just look at that sprayed edge. I think there were 2 different editions, one for Rose and one for Rem, which is the different characters, and I think this is the one for Rose just because it has the roses on the side. But this is a series that I have really enjoyed. I met the authors at Yauk and they were absolutely lovely, and I've just realised this is signed. I didn't actually look inside this when I bought it, I just saw the sprayed edges and grabbed it. And it's signed! That means the whole collection of this series, I know this is a tangent, but I've just realised they're all signed. So the Twin Crowns, I had the original like Waterstones one of this, but my friend had 2 copies of the Fairy Loot edition, so she kind of gave me one, and that one is like digitally signed. But then at Yauk I took Cursed Crowns, and they actually like sign that with my name. And then this one is signed. I thought it was an exclusive edition just because of the sprayed edges. I didn't realise it was signed. Oh wow. Okay, sorry, that was a tangent, but yeah, I just think this is really beautiful. Like, the cover itself really stands out. I love the orange and the gold, and the sprayed edges is gorgeous, but like with the other books in the series, they all look really pretty on the shelf anyway. Although maybe I do need to find a sprayed edge version of Cursed Crowns so they all match. Then the final question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And there are probably at least 100 books that I could mention for this, but there are some that have just been on my shelves for a very long time that every month I'm like, I'm gonna read it this month, and just still haven't gotten around to it. So I really want to finish this series by Lucy Score. I don't know what it's called, but I read the first book, Things We Never Got Over, last year, potentially even 2 years ago. I'm not too sure when it came out. It was probably last year. And I've just not picked up these 2, and I really enjoyed the first book. The covers are pretty, and they've just been on my shelves too long to have been unread. Another one is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sulin Tan. I got this at Hay Festival last year, and Honestly, I really wanted it because of the cover, like the spine, the colours, everything is so pretty. And last month I picked it up and was gonna read it, but I just wasn't in the mood, and I feel like it's one that I always stare at when I'm trying to decide what I want to read, but I always pass over it. And I don't know why. Like I need to get to it. And it's exactly the same with Babel. This has been on my TBR, I don't know how long, multiple times it's been on my monthly TBR and I've not got to it. I think honestly I'm just a bit intimidated by it because I think it's a bit different to the kind of thing I normally read, but I've heard so many good reviews about it. And then I also keep thinking like it's the perfect book to read like autumn. I feel like it's supposed to be spooky, so then I just keep putting it off because I feel like it's not the right time of year, and then the right time of year comes around and then I just kind of forget about it. And I just really want to get to it. And yeah, we could be here forever if I sit and go through all of the books that I need to read by the end of the year. So that's the end of the questions for the midyear book freakout tag. I'm glad I finally got around to taking part in this, but I'd be really interested to know what your answers are to any of these questions. Like if you've done this video, then please let me know down below because I will definitely check it out. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will hopefully see you next week. But I'm a bit behind on my pre-filming and I'm going on holiday and I don't know if I'm gonna have enough content filmed and uploaded before I go. So hopefully I'll see you next week. If not, it might be 3 weeks.